Super Mario 64 came out and shocked the world, taking the iconic character from 2D to 3D in an all-new world-hopping adventure. This formula was very successful for Nintendo, as at the time, people just couldn't stop talking about it. This left a lot of game companies feeling jealous, one in particular, Square Enix. Known for their Final Fantasy franchise, Square was a big name in gaming and had all the available resources to make such a game. The only thing they were missing was an icon. They needed something as big as Mario, but they didn't have any to choose from. This was the first barrier to their success, leaving them stumped with how they were going to find such a character, and from where. As impossible as the dream seemed, Square had picked a target, Mickey Mouse. Possibly one of the most popular characters of the century. You see, as ballsy as this move was, Square had shared the same building as the offices of Disney Japan. As luck would have it, one day a producer from Square, Shinji Hashimoto, would be in the same elevator as the Disney executive and would present the best pitch he had ever presented in his life, because somehow the mouse agreed. A crew was assembled of over 100 staffers and things were finally in motion for the game. However, there were still two more issues in Square's way. The first was the game didn't have a director. The second issue, however, was a lot more serious. You see, Square thought they hit the jackpot by getting Mickey Mouse, but the truth was they were only allowed to use Mickey for one scene, and he was only allowed to say 4 words. This must have been very disappointing for Square to hear, but they kept pushing forward anyway, and found a director with no past experience as one, by the name of Tetsuya Nomura, an artist who was known for the iconic designs of Final Fantasy VII's characters. Square not having access to Mickey meant that they would have to come up with an original character for the game. Nomura came up with some interesting designs, such as Sora with a chainsaw, which I'm sure left many Disney execs horrified. Finally, they settled with a Keyblade, and the game which had went into development as Kingdom had to be changed to Kingdom Hearts. This was due to some trademark issues, but finally, it was ready. The game that shouldn't have existed was made. In my personal opinion, you can't make a game like this great without 3 core features being well fleshed out. The combat, which in an action RPG is probably what you'll be doing the most of. The story, which has to be good enough to hook the player so that they will commit to finishing the game. And last but not least, the gameplay loop. This is what you'll be doing outside of fighting. Without this aspect being thought out and planned, you don't have a game. Was this too much to ask for a rookie game director? Let's find out. Kingdom Hearts has one of the best combat systems I've seen in a long time. It just takes about 40 hours to see it, so the regular average Joe would never commit themselves to get there. However, I'm not the average Joe, and when I played this game, I wanted to truly complete everything it had to offer. So I had to farm mobs for hours using a very boring corridor strat. 40 hours later, and I'd finally gotten stronger. But at what cost? You see, a lot of games have this save all the cool stuff for the end mentality. I don't really understand it, because it takes away from the experience. But if you're willing to stick through it, Kingdom Hearts becomes a million times better. Using moves like Arcanum to burst down HP bars quickly, or Strike Raid to beat down your enemies from far away are all very welcome additions. But what truly saved the combat system was 3 moves, so daring, so legendary, so... That's right, I'm talking about sliding dash, dodge roll, and guard. Yes, they have a block button. I don't know what went down during the development of Kingdom Hearts, but I'm certain at least 2 of these moves were not always unlocks. They feel so essential after you unlock them that second playthroughs almost feel like torture in the early stages. Who the hell removed the block button? After finally being able to stop taking unnecessary damage, let's talk about the next area of the combat. Magic. This is a very welcome addition as it allows players the option to have multiple playstyles. Though I went with the more brute force approach, using my Keyblade and spamming through enemies, magic was very useful, as Cure, a spell that lets me heal me or my party, kept me and my party alive. Thunder, a spell that let me clear a room full of enemies in very quick succession, is a spell that I used a lot, because there were a bunch of enemies on the screen all the time. The rest of the magic was cool, but I didn't really have use for them, because there was no need to. That's a good thing because the game gives you a lot of choices. However, the magic does feel like a waste, as a bunch of them are just used for specific enemy types and playing charades. Yes, you heard that correctly. So one summer holiday, I was away at my dad's house and I found a movie that, touched me in a different way. And this was The Lion King 2. Now, I never really connected with that film the way I did until I watched it then. And it's such a good memory for me, going back and seeing that in Kingdom Hearts 1. Because it's something that's deeply connected to my childhood and it brought back a lot of good memories for me. And I'm sure that's why they included such a feature like this. There's characters in this game that they couldn't include in the story. Maybe they couldn't find a narrative way to weave them in, or the contracts didn't let them have them. But they're brought into the story in a way that I think is very creative and smart. Summons. This was the aspect of the game that I found most exciting, because as you unlock new summons, you unlocked very unique characters with very unique abilities that came to aid you in combat, and this was a very cool aspect that I don't think a lot of games do. I know in Final Fantasy it's very common to summon characters, but seeing that done with Disney characters, in the way this game's combat system works, they all aid you in the flow of battle, in a very different and unique way each time, and I thought that was very impressive because they had to be creative on two levels. First, they had to find a character from Disney that was able to connect with the audience. Then they had to give that character a unique ability that was able to aid the character Sora in combat using the game's combat systems, which I think is a very impressive thing. The ability to call forth Simba to roar, obliterating enemies in front of me is absolutely incredible. Each of the summons having their own attributes and powers to feel unique made each one feel so fun. It made me excited every time I got a new one. But similar to before, it's not as deep as it looks, and you'll probably only end up using 2 of those summons. However, I couldn't get over the feeling of some of my favourite Disney characters fighting alongside me. Outside of boss encounters and the combat itself, this is probably one of my favourite aspects of the game. Overall, the game's combat system is very much ahead of its time. Using a small action menu to select items or cast spells is very much impressive. I can't believe that many games didn't use this going forward, and I'd love to see a lot more games try this in future. The only game to come in my head when I think of this is Final Fantasy VII Remake, and that is also made by Square Enix, so I'm not surprised that they would use this feature again. It's very much impressive because it takes the turn-based aspect of Final Fantasy and merges it into something more common in an action RPG. And there you have it, the combat system in Kingdom Hearts 1. Kingdom Hearts is a game that's usually memed on for not making too much sense. Coming into the game, that was kind of true. I came into Kingdom Hearts expecting a kid-friendly, simple save the princess type story. I was wrong. I'm so happy I was. The game would surprise me with its characters, plot, setting, and tone. This game reaches a level of narrative that Square Enix are renowned for with Final Fantasy. Well, sometimes. You see, the game is still very much a kid's game, so they often dumb down the plot, leading to a lot of very stupid contrasts in tone. However, I'm going to let this slide because this was Disney and Square's first team up. Due to this, I feel like Square was afraid to use some of the Disney characters in a more meaningful way. Maybe due to the fact they were trying to play nice with Disney, or they didn't want to violate anything in their contract, but any Disney character often felt underutilized in the game. Mainly the villains, but a lot of the good guys were also very bland. This often made the story feel jaded, as you had to face about 5 Disney villains and didn't care about any of them, as they are just stepping stones for the main plot. Each Disney character you team up with is great and offers a story, but it's kinda more akin to side content before you get back on the gummy ship and face the real threat. In turn, I feel like this adds to some of the general confusion around the game, as the game adds a lot of these in-between segments that don't really add anything to the main plot, in turn giving the game a lot of weight it just can't seem to handle. However, those Disney characters aren't bad. They could have just been better woven into the story. I'm sure this is something the devs would have addressed in the sequels. In contrast, all original or Final Fantasy characters deliver. Leon, Yuffie, Aerith, and Sid Garland are characters that are woven a lot better into the story and don't have massive roles. Funny enough, these are characters however that Nomura was told to utilize more, as Square felt the narrative didn't feel as in-depth as Final Fantasy games. This also led to the addition of some of the most confusing lore I have ever seen in any video game, which can be considered annoying at times, but personally I felt like the lore was a great addition, as players could have more free range to think and try and piece together some of these very confusing concepts, which is very respectful of the intelligence of a 10-year-old, the game's target audience.
Well, what are you talking about?
The game's villains are great too, however I felt like the final villain doesn't truly appear until the third act, so I don't really know much about them. I wish we could have gotten more interactions and more motivation to stopping them, outside of them being evil of course. But again, I'm going to let this slide because this was Disney and Square's first team up, and this was also a 2002 kids game. I wasn't expecting anything crazy from character development or writing. But this is one of the aspects where the game definitely does show its age, just due to how much character development and writing has improved since then. The game's story does have some moments, but they won't have you on the edge of your seats. Even sad moments won't have you crying. At least I hope not. But overall, the narrative of the game is just consumable enough if you can go in kind of expecting it not to make too much sense and just enjoy it. It definitely does feel like the game was created with sequels in mind, which is very cocky, but given what the game is, it would have been even more strange if there wasn't a sequel. However, this doesn't help the narrative's case at all, because I felt like the writers just left a lot of the questions unanswered for the sake of answering them in later games. The general gameplay loop is very simple. Go to a world, kill stuff, help Disney character, kill boss, seal keyhole, and repeat. Nothing too crazy, but it will keep you entertained. I actually forgot how free games were back then, as in this game they don't do too much hand-holding for your objectives, so you have to refer back to your game journal or pay attention to all dialogue. Your last option is to explore until something just happens, but you really don't want to use that option, ever, because this can cost you hours. Each world had unique settings, layouts, and enemies, which added to the experience, making each setting feel that much more distinct, even though your objective was practically the same, but that's a fair trade-off to me. Enemies were also unique and had very different movesets. Hidden and secret enemies also existed, which had their own individual weaknesses that weren't shared with others. Yes, this isn't a game where you just hit things and they die. Well, all the time that is. But by far, my favourite experience in this game were the boss encounters, from learning how to parry and properly fight some of the most difficult bosses in the game, to getting destroyed by new unique mechanics of the next one. Just a heads up, going into this game, just know you're going to be fighting some of the bosses for a very long time. Trust me. The game also offers a lot in terms of exploration, with some worlds giving you different traversal mechanics, from flying to swimming as a merman and swinging through the trees of a jungle. There's collectibles and chests hidden high and low, and that's very satisfying to come across because some of them contain some valuable items that you can need in some of the boss encounters, such as elixirs and mega potions that can often save you in a tight spot, so the exploration in this game is very much encouraged. It's also a must for completionists like myself who was stupid enough to want to build the ultimate weapon. Looking for rare enemy locations and items was very crucial. The gameplay loop was an aspect I really enjoyed with this game, exploring new worlds and new settings that felt very different. But there was one key thing, one thing that set them apart each time, and that was the music. The game is definitely very much a Final Fantasy relative. With some of the most amazing OSTs in games, it's no surprise that Kingdom Hearts would also deliver. With the fantastic voice of Hikaru Utada, they gave us an amazing opening to the game that made the ending that much more special when you hear it again for one last time. Or the choirs used in many of the scores that send chills through your body. Every tune evokes just the right amount of emotion and can make a moment feel even more special, something I mentioned in my Final Fantasy XIV review. Square and music just seem to be best friends. On the same summer vacation I came across The Lion King, I also found Kingdom Hearts 2 for the first time, and what drew me in immediately was the opening song. I can never shake the tune of that song from my head, and it's been stuck in my mind since then. It's something that stuck with me and made me want to come back and review the series to this day. I really enjoyed the music of this game, and I thought that was one of the best aspects that's there. A lot of review channels often leave this part out, but the music is so important to this game, and it truly helps with how the story is told. I feel like without the music, this game just wouldn't be the same. Now that we know the history of this game, and now that we reviewed it, from what I can tell, this game is a miracle. It should definitely not exist. But this is a perfect example of what passion and care from companies and developers can create. Long-lasting franchises that fans love for years to come. And I hope that we see more series like this in future. I hope more games are this passionate and take leaps like this. This was such a risk, but it paid off very well for Square and Disney, so well done and congratulations to them. And with the announcement of Kingdom Hearts 4, I'd be looking forward to stepping into the new game in the series after I catch up with the rest of them. If you like this video, be sure to check out my review on Final Fantasy Realm Reborn, which is very similar to this video. If you want future reviews, make sure to leave a subscribe down below, and a like would also be appreciated. I'll see you all